E3. Every year, gamers speculate about the exciting announcements that await in that magical week of June. This year, we're cutting through the speculation and getting answers directly from the source. A fortune teller named Brian.
With how excited I am for E3 this year, I've been searching for just about any justifiable way to talk about it on this channel, and just as I was about to give up hope, this little beauty found its way into my recommended videos. For those of you unaware, E3 is a yearly event held in California where all the major game studios all gather together to deliver huge blowout announcements to the largest group of people possible. In this video, Brian the fortune teller is going to tell us what we can expect from E3 2018. I would like to say in advance that while I will give the host here the benefit of the doubt in assuming that this was just a fun bullshit video idea and that he doesn't actually buy it, as Brian seems to do it for a living and I saw several comments defending it as reliable, I feel it's still important to point out the bullshit. With that all said, let's just jump in.
I traveled to Eye of Horus in Minneapolis, Minnesota to fulfill their mission statement of awakening my spirit and transforming myself. In this case, into gaming's next soothsayer, a la Michael Pachter, Psycho Mantis, or Wario64.
So do you have any specific questions or topics?
Right off the bat, I'd like to draw your attention to his request for quote-unquote specific topics and questions. This is because of the way that fortune-telling works, which we'll get into more throughout the video, but simply keep that detail in mind going forward.
Yes, so I would like to know the futures of all of the companies presenting press conferences at E3 this year, starting with Microsoft.
So, for Microsoft, the root card down here is the Ten of Swords. Here, the base energy is, it seems like the company would be trying to hide from something that it ended up suffering because of, because they didn't look at a truth directly on.
So does this card represent the launch of the Xbox One?
Boy, that could be for sure. I have an Xbox One.
Now, assuming that Brian here has some preliminary knowledge of E3 and what it entails, as he seems to demonstrate throughout this video, this supposed energy that he posits makes a lot of sense from a standpoint of erring on the side of vague and general, as fortune tellers tend to do. This is a way for the fortune teller to gauge the way that the client thinks and get a feel for what they're expecting. Also notice how the host immediately puts the supposed energy that Brian describes together with some of his own understanding and predictions about E3, thus giving Brian a lot more to work with. This is a theme throughout and is required for a fortune teller to get anywhere in convincing somebody that they know anything at all.
Then, as we look at the rest of this, so the Five of Cups, this basically shows like an old married couple. So when this thing gets turned upside down, it basically shows something that was old and shitty basically has turned around and there's like new hope for this old relationship. Then the Eight of Wands, so it shows this potential energy or something that has been growing and growing where they finally pull the trigger on it, and followed by the High Priestess. The High Priestess is very secretive, so we've got this sort of like some sort of message about something that's been coming for a while, but at the same time the High Priestess is showing holding back on some other big thing too, and like being very secretive and not talking about it.
So like Halo 6?
There's quite a bit to note in this section. Notice the way that he describes the second card, the Five of Cups, as something old and shitty being given new hope. It's important to note how similar this description is to the first card, with the first card seeming to imply that Microsoft will be attempting to hide from something that went wrong in the past, and the Xbox One was posited as it had a rocky start. However, the second card implies that something old and shitty like the Xbox One at launch will get turned around, which is also something that, as a current Xbox One owner, Brian would know is already currently happening with the system making a bit of a rebound. The third card, the Eight of Wands, focuses on the idea of pressure building up and finally having the trigger pulled, which is simply an exact explanation of what E3 is all about. It's where the companies wait and all at once pull the trigger on their biggest announcements that they've been hoarding. And finally, the last card, the High Priestess, which supposedly hints at Microsoft being very secretive about something that's been coming for a long time and holding back, which once again is exactly what E3 is all about and is exactly what anybody with a preliminary knowledge of E3 would expect to have happen there.
Maybe. The Knight of Swords is very protective. It's kind of the territorial protector. I could see
Jay Allard.
how that might be the Halo franchise, but I don't know. I wouldn't take that directly as a yes.
I'd like you to take notice of the fact that rather than simply saying that it isn't said one way or another in the cards that he's already pulled, he very theatrically pulls another card and then offers his very vague, pointless answer, thus attempting to add more credence to his cards while also not giving any sort of answer that can be easily disproved.
Are there any other projects like that that Microsoft has that is like Knights?
Age of Empires.
Yeah, and we got a dragon here.
Here Brian asks a very direct question, searching for an answer to bolster his card out of the areas where his knowledge of the company is not quite so solid. And as soon as he's given something that he can use, he immediately shifts his focus to that, because the client having been the one to suggest it makes them much more likely to buy into it when reiterated by the teller.
Do you see anything about headphones?
Headphones. I don't see headphones there.
Okay.
I mean, so it's someone who is about to change and is definitely resisting change, but I don't think that that has anything to do with what you were talking about, the headphones.
The way the headphone question was asked put Brian in a position where he was unable to discern whether the client was expecting a positive or negative answer, and as he had no knowledge of why the headphones would be asked about, he went for a safe, vague answer of it not being in the cards.
Now we would be looking at Sony.
That's funny. So we have the same root card that showed up for Microsoft. So the Ten of Swords is again about not wanting to face a certain truth, but the truth catches up with them. That's really interesting.
While it is statistically unlikely that the root card would come up to be the same, it is certainly not anything to claim as supernatural, as some in the comments of this video seem to do. And it works well in Brian's favor here, as the way he described it earlier was in such a vague way that it could really be applied to any potential company at E3 without issue.
So then we have the Reverse Star, Nine of Wands, and Page of Swords. So the Star is basically when you get what you ask for.
So like a Final Fantasy VII remake?
So when the star shows up reversed, it's when you get something that you wish for, but it doesn't show up at all the way you thought it would. So it would be like a Final Fantasy remake that sucked.
Again, he does not confirm or deny the direct question posed to him here. Instead, he immediately backpedals and claims that it would be something that people wanted but would be ultimately disappointed by, which is not at all rare for game companies, as well as it being something that oftentimes people are not disappointed by until launch, meaning that by the time they're disappointed, they will have likely forgotten this whole encounter.
So then the Nine of Wands, the Nine of Wands would essentially show something that really centers around hope and maybe a maze.
Everybody is hopeful going into E3, meaning anybody could potentially see any announcement as being full of hope, but I like that he throws in maybe a maze at the end, as maze is a very vague term on its own, as many games could be considered maze-like. However, if somebody considers a Sony announcement to be maze-like, they will attribute it to being a true prediction, whereas the vague way that he states it means he will also be safe if nothing even resembling a maze is shown.
Then we get the Page of Swords. So the Page of Swords is like a kid. This would look like something new, for one, and it would also look like something that would have the sword sort of thing in it, but it also looks like it has robotics in it too.
Mega Man 11?
It does kind of look like Mega Man.
Brian says here that the Page of Swords hints at something new, which nearly all E3 announcements are, and by mentioning both the sword and the robotic aspects of the card, he covers a whole lot of potential bases, as there's a ton of different game types that would likely involve either swords, robots, or both.
Do you guys do any seances?
No, I don't.
Okay.
Weird. This is showing some family stuff. So the Queen of Swords would be like this parent thing, and then the Page of Swords, this is some new thing, but it's like of the same family.
What's Death Stranding about?
Death Stranding? I'm gonna let you do this because it's a pretty foreign energy to me. So just think about that. The Fool. So the Fool is the first card of the tarot, and it basically shows someone at the beginning of a brand new journey. It's about possibility, and it's about no fear and no expectation.
So essentially these three cards together hint towards something new that is similar to something established and represents the beginning of a new journey. This, yet again, just sounds like him describing what anybody with a basic knowledge of E3 would expect to find.
Are you calling Kojima a fool?
No.
Good. So then moving on to Nintendo.
Close your focus and open your mind.
So we have the same root card that the other two companies had in the Ten of Swords. That is really fascinating.
Again, rare, but certainly not impossible.
All right, so the Four of Swords is basically about separation and rest and like kind of rejuvenating, right? When this thing turns upside down, it either means that there's been enough time and the thing is rejuvenated and ready to like come back, or there is never time to rest or rejuvenate. So, I mean, in the case of Nintendo, that would be very Mario-like, where like it just never stops, you know?
DLC.
That makes sense.
Brian very clearly gives away his own trick here. By predicting something Mario-related, because it never stops, just makes logical sense, as, like he says, Nintendo never stops releasing Mario games. And when the client mentions DLC, Brian immediately latches onto that yet again, and because he knows that the client is more knowledgeable about what would likely appear at E3, he lets the client fuel his predictions while making them feel as if the card fit their predictions.
So then we also have the Fool. So the Fool is about some brand new shit, right? This is super powerful, and this is like something that could theoretically actually affect people's lives.
Nintendo's health initiative.
It could be, for sure.
This is a substantially different explanation than was given for the previous Fool card, and is actually one of the bolder predictions made by Brian in this video. However, this is likely due to the fact that since he's already made so many quote-unquote predictions by this point, he feels that he has some freedom to be slightly less vague. And then, having been given a bone by the client, he plays it off in a much more vague way to protect himself.
So we've got this thing that never rests. Then we've got this brand new super powerful thing. And here, the Ten of Cups is a happy reunited family.
Like brothers.
Right, and here this thing upside down is when the family they're not happy. So it's like a reunion, but it sucks.
A port.
Yeah, that could definitely be the case.
A few things here. First off, what Brian's describing here does sound rather like Smash Brothers, which we already know will be shown off at E3 this year, and Brian likely knows that as well, as it was a huge announcement a couple of months ago. So this would make some sense. However, the part that confuses me is the host's hint towards a port. For those of you unfamiliar, a port is a game that was on a previous console that is being brought to a newer console. If the host is talking about Smash Brothers being a port, he's simply incorrect, as it has already been confirmed to be a new game. If this was a deliberate attempt to trip Brian up, however, well done, as it seems to have worked.
Could you tell me how much this is worth?
I don't do Pokemon, I'm a Magic player.
Okay.
But this is intriguing.
Metroid Prime?
I doubt that this is something that has existed before.
Okay, so you think it'd be a new franchise?
I believe so.
Which is something that gets announced very frequently at E3.
And like from space, you know? I mean, Metroid is from space. But like some brand new shit. Like when I used to read about Spore, that's what I thought about Spore. You know, this is like that.
Looks so like a Star Fox, but like racing.
And the host here gives yet another piece of information that has already been supposedly leaked and that he believes fits with the given explanation of the cards.
Here, so the card that comes out with it is the Judgment card. The thing that's sticking out, because this is the Angel of Judgment, and it's blowing this trumpet. So I don't know if the trumpet has something to do with it, if it's like some musical thing, but it's like this powerful announcement for sure.
The most powerful announcements of the year for most major gaming companies are saved for E3. This is not news.
Do you guys do palm readings at all?
Yes. I could read the part of your palm that's exposed, but it would be far easier if you did not have the glove on.
No, that's fine. Can you tell me what GameInformer's next cover story will be?
Getting out of the woods. They've been stuck in this forest, right? And the forest is like really scary, and they're also not free to do all of the things that they want to do. So it shows someone coming into freedom after being restricted for a really long time.
As GameInformer is a rather large gaming publication, they're of course going to be restricted as all large publications are. This is just use of simple basic knowledge of publication companies to seem as if you know more than you should.
Well, I can't comment on rumors or fortune tellings, so... Can you tell me if Todd Howard will live forever?
Todd Howard will live as long as I do. I want to see if they're anywhere near Elder Scrolls 6. I wouldn't take that as a yes.
In other words, the answer is not in the cards because the answer, either positive or negative, could be easily disproved, so the only safe answer is an uninspired shrug.
What really happens here, this is like a bunch of emotional baggage, and the person just like walks away from it.
Todd Howard's new IP.
Well, for that the Emperor comes out, and that's definitely a more like positive sign. So the Emperor is all about control. It's a very projecting card, right?
Pete Hines. Is there going to be a new Splinter Cell?
So this showed up in the Sony thing, right? So really the Page of Swords, he kind of sees what it is that he looks for. So what I would get out of that is that there would be hints at a new Splinter Cell.
Or night vision goggles.
But maybe not like the actual thing. I mean, it'd be something that you'd have to look for to find.
Or, yet again, in other words, if it is shown off, you'll probably have to search really hard and use your own confirmation bias to convince yourself that it's been hinted at all.
Have you ever done any work with Walmart Canada? No. Suspicious. Thank you so much for helping us out.
For sure.
No reason to tune in into any of the live streams.
So just as a quick recap, Brian's E3 predictions are, I don't know, it's E3. Maybe it'll be kind of like E3? Well, that's the end of this video. It is a rather long one, I know, but I had to fit this into my channel somehow, both because I'm very excited for E3 this year, as well as because fortune-telling is one of the biggest scams aside from religion that people tend to buy into, and there's just no good reason to believe any of it. Thank you all very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to leave a like and a comment down below telling me what you're most excited for at E3 this upcoming weekend. Subscribe for future content, and as always, have a blessed day, fellow heathens.